too, but
Hey yo, what up, Wisecrack? Chris here to talk about something that's been dishing out fatalities since 1992. That's right. Now, we're longtime fans of the game and even have a soft spot for the often ridiculed 1995 film. So we are pretty jazzed for a 2021 reboot and the opportunity to hear "Get over here" on the big screen. But as the end credits rolled, something just wasn't sitting right. Don't misunderstand us. It brings a certain level of fun and spectacular blood squirting, and that might be all you want from a Mortal Kombat movie, which is fine. But we'd argue that the movie misunderstands a basic appeal of Mortal Kombat that the 1995 version mostly got right. We'll explain in this Wisecrack edition on Mortal Kombat what went wrong, and spoilers ahead for the Mortal Kombat Extended Universe. And before we jump into it, I wanted to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid is an awesome hero collector RPG where you can collect champions and battle up against friends or players online. We've been playing Raid for a while now here at Wisecrack, so we've been able to collect a lot of champions. Some of my faves include the epic Battle Sage and the legendary Astrolon. They are essential to my clan. Battle Sage places an increased attack buff on all allies, and removes all debuffs on allies, and places a revival on death buff for all your teammates, which can be so helpful. Collecting heroes and building up my team is one of my favorite parts of the game. You can really plan a strategy before heading against.
We understand. We know about Raid Shadow Legends. We've heard. Android or PC. We've heard the good news.
And now back to the show. To one guy saying, and the je ne sais quoi of impaling your opponent on a floor of spikes. Mortal Kombat differs from other fighting games.
By the way, guys, if we have time and if people want to play today, we're down to do like a community among us. So if we have the people that want to play and do something like that, that'd be dope. But I want to see if we got people to do it.
It's a blend of humor, self-awareness, and joyful over-the-topness in everything from the costume design to the character concepts. Compare that to a competitor like Street Fighter, a relatively straightforward fighting game that, while featuring a green dude who electrocutes you, generally takes itself pretty seriously. By contrast, whether you're turning your opponent into a literal baby or just turning them into your new best friend, Mortal Kombat fully embraces the ridiculous, even and maybe especially in its most violent moments. And the 1995 film followed the same ethos, and not just when you are watching a six-limb puppet get owned by a single punch to the groin. From its set design to its performances, the film is nothing if not over the top. In this way, both the game and the original film are excellent examples of the camp aesthetic. And I'm not talking about bent.
This would be fun to talk about, actually. Susan Sontag had a very famous essay on camp. Is actually a lot with what I had to study in cult cinema. And when we talk about camp being an aspect, a good example of this is actually The Room, meaning like it's so extravagant and ridiculous, but it doesn't notice it. And that's a big definition of camp.
Now, camp is a word that gets tossed around a lot in film buff circles, but it's worth really examining what it means. As Helen A. Shugart and Catherine Egley-Wagon explain, camp is an over-the-top, playful, and parodic aesthetic, and its use of the exaggerated, ostentatious, outrageous renders
parodic,
it effectively
also
a spectacle. Though camp has become virtually mainstream in recent decades, appearing in everything from Desperate Housewives to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it originated in queer subcultures as far back as the 18th century.
Yeah, and it is. A lot of it comes from queer subculture, but as he said, things like Buffy is a good example.
The aesthetic became a way
something
to
that's
use camp's
campy,
irony, theatricality, parody, and
also
humor
something
to cope
that's
with and
famously
combat
known as camp, which is the original Batman and Robin TV show with Adam West.
Stigma. In Susan Sontag's notes on camp, she identifies the camp aesthetic in various cultural products, ranging from
Susan Sontag, by the way, is very popular in academia, but as well like for where I go to school, because she was actually a professor at my school before she died.
Lamps to actress Greta Garbo. The unifying theme here is that they all broadcast their own theatricality and artifice. The films of John Waters are also a prime example of campiness, delivering wretched, often...
Actually, Juno, that's a really interesting thing that you brought up, because we'd identify this and talk about it in New Age cult, which there's a lot of examinations of if it is cult. I would say it is cult, not necessarily camp. However, it is definitely something that is a commodified cult, which was another thing that we started talking about, which has become very popular the like so bad it's good like aesthetic has become something that's very commodifiable. But we talk a lot about this because also blockbusters have started doing a lot of the same thing. One of Umberto Eco's essays, which you probably heard me bring him up before in regards to talking about fascism, since he grew up in fascist Italy and wrote his 14 points on fascism. But he also wrote about cult cinema and other parts in cinema and culture, but cult cinema specifically. Casablanca as one of the first cult films. And a big part of what they consider cult is having these like very memey scenes now, and to put it in a new age speak, where like things are very bite-sized and you remember those specific parts. I think a good example of this is looking at things like what's the movie called? The Big Lebowski. And you can remember a lot of scenes, a lot of parts of the movie, but so much of those are like memified themselves. But do you remember the exact sequence of events? This is an aspect of cult that we recognize. Similarly, something in like Sharknado is where the spectacle takes over a lot of scenes and a lot of your memory on these things. Shut the fuck up, Donnie. Yeah, exactly.
And filthy excess with a Lucille Bluth style wink. All in all,
camp
like, is simply
the memification of it is actually a part of this cult aspect of where it's easy to remember these scenes, these repeatable scenes. There's even kind of like a joke on this of how blockbuster films have started using this. I'd like to point towards the first Avengers film where Captain Rogers, Captain America, is like, hey, I know that reference. But a lot of the film is like that, right? This was something that they took from cult cinema.
But too much, man. Camp culture, in some ways, is an attack on high culture, according to Sontag, in that it asserts that good.
So that's what I was going to bring up too. Is like, I saw Hassan bring this up actually in a different context, which I found very interesting. But basically, oh yeah, he was talking about being straight edge. It's very much similar to this in cult and mainstream cinema, right? Cult derived itself from the mainstream, so there is no cult without the mainstream.
Taste is not simply good taste, that there exists indeed a good taste of bad taste. Now, campiness permeates just about every frame of the 1995 Mortal Kombat film. That's why, even though the film was not particularly well received when it first came out, it's retained a serious
I can't wait to talk. You're talking
about
more
clear in the opening moments when we see an over-dramatically
film
rendered
and media
fight
stuff like this.
In
Actually,
over the top canted or dramatically tilted.
I do have
angles.
something I kind of want to talk about.
It's punctuated by sound effects that are much too loud.
If we want to make it a film and media stream, that's also political.
Oh, and then his face turns into a skeleton, and if that's not too much, I don't know what is. When this guy's eye full-on twitches, that's camp. When a giant skull appears in the sky through less than convincing CGI effects, that's also camp.
So I also, by the way, just wrote an essay on whether, and this is maybe something I'd like to talk over. It'd be very difficult to explain like all of it without going deep into like research, which funnily enough, there was many or several papers before me talking about the subject, which makes it even more exciting. But I was talking about the fan base of Neon Genesis Evangelion cult, and I wrote a whole 10-page paper and thesis on is it cult, and then the other question that gets lumped in with anime and cult cinema is, or is it otaku? And then there's this whole discussion between what is the otaku, defining that, and then also and what makes something otaku compared to what makes something cult. And that's something very interesting and nothing that we captured in my class, and that was a very unique thing for me to like research on and discuss, and so that was really exciting.
What more do you want?
I'm a big Evangelion fan, so like that was really cool.
Total camp. And when the camera literally tilts under this guy's crotch just as he's asserting his masculinity, you better believe that's camp. But did the filmmakers do all of this on purpose? That question raises an important tension within the camp aesthetic: intentionality. According to Sontag, sometimes camp is completely naive, happening by mistake and resulting in failed seriousness. The Room, of course, is an absolute masterclass.
I love it when I hear myself repeated in another video.
Other times, as with
this
any
was
performance by the
something that we watched a little bit about too, actually, in our cult class. I didn't fully finish this up, but Pink Flamingos is something that we talked about.
Film, the campiness is the intention. The creators are in on the joke. What's interesting about Mortal Kombat is that it feels like we're seeing instances of both kinds of camp within one film, which is pretty unusual. The campy performance by Christopher Lambert as Lord Raiden feels pretty purposeful. There's just no way he wanted you to take his character completely seriously, if seriously at all. In moments like these, the film feels like it's self-consciously trying to be camp.
It's how do you say?
It probably should have been too, like you were saying, right? It's ridiculous in the first place.
What have you done? I made a choice.
As a means of
also,
leaning
by the
into
way,
the
guys,
video game's absurdity.
I know I already brought it up, but trying to get this follower goal, we're trying to get up to 100. That'd be amazing. And then the sub goal of 5 more subs. Those can be gifted, those could be resubs, anything like that. But then we can get our new emote slot for tier 1. So I can bring back the based emote for tier 1. Because right now it's only accessible if you get tier 2. Just an FYI on that. But like, yeah, 5 more subs, whether they be resubs or random gifted or whatever. And then we're so close to 100 followers. We didn't get new followers or subs last stream. That's whatever. It's still nice just seeing everyone come through and sticking
like
through.
This divine moment when a ninja comes up to fight but trips over himself.
That's what's been the best overall stream-wise, is that we've been in general always have someone come through, and that's awesome.
Failed seriousness
those are the new
somehow
goals.
make the film more lovable. The
We can
absurdity
try and
of
figure
Mortal
out
Kombat's camp
what the
aesthetic is a big part
consequence
of why
or
it's
the
remained
gift
such a cult
is
classic.
to getting the follower goal.
And also heads blowing off. This is why we were puzzled to see how the screenwriter behind the remake approached retelling the story. He told Polygon that with something like Mortal Kombat, where we're talking about soul-sucking sorcerers, it can very easily slip into camp. So right away, he's rejecting some of Mortal Kombat's DNA. He continued, I love the 95 film, but it drips in nacho cheese. But we were in 2021, and we wanted to deliver a movie that felt more authentic, a little more realistic. I mean, realistic isn't the first word that comes to mind when I see this. But okay, the decision to lean out from the camp factor is not subtle. The overall aesthetics of the newest installment are less colorful, less zany, and less punctuated.
This has been a huge thing in modern blockbusters, which I think is getting very tired, but is the dark tints aesthetic. I think so much of it came from The Dark Knight, these huge Chris Nolan films, which are great, but like everyone needed the huge bois and the whole like low tint, high contrast. Like, I don't know.
Over the top set
we need to get done with it.
Instead, and despite clearly having a bigger budget, the new film exercises far more visual restraint, settling for darker, barer shots,
Juno,
and simpler production design.
Thank you so
Also,
much. Juno gifted a subscriber to Jay Mills, who was in here actually the other day. So thank you so much for gifting a sub. You definitely didn't have to. I know I lured it out there in the first place, but seriously, thank you. More subs is it's just very exciting. Gets people to come back more often, and well, you know, gets us to that sub goal.
Bit of it takes place in the real world, which is depicted quite unremarkably.
Thank you a lot,
Camera
Juno.
angles err on the side of
supporting the
conventional,
stream.
as compared
As always,
to
in
its
so many different ways that you do.
aforementioned widely canted angles and occasional crotch shot. The total differences between the two films are obvious from the first moments of the new film, which don't include the glorious theme song, but rather set up a true family tragedy. In the 1995 version, when Liu Kang sees his brother get murdered, the fighting is over the top, rendered a near total caricature by the performances. It's not trying to tug at your heartstrings. In the new version, a woman and her child are murdered off screen by Killer Ice Guy in a moment conveyed through this guttural cry for help. Her husband, upon finding them dead, seeks a tearful revenge against the attackers, only to tragically be defeated. Here, they've built up a genuine drama which sets the tone for a film that is definitely not going to embrace the goof factor. Except Mortal Kombat isn't supposed to be about killing people's families. It's about melting a person's face with acid. And it feels like a bit of a contradiction to make a determinedly serious,
Also, Juno, you are now in
film
second
when you
place for
literally have a character
gifted
whose
subs, by the way.
magical power is having a killer hat. We can also see these
Seeing
kinds
up
of
at,
problems in more
the top of the
one-to-one
chat.
comparisons. Take the way Kano is murdered in each film. In the first, he's put into a deadly crotch hold, says,
"Oh, give me a break,"
and promptly has his neck broken by the sheer force of Sonya's thighs. It's ridiculous. It's goofy.
Fucking
in
poggers,
the new
dude.
version, he's stabbed in the eye, emitting a guttural moan as he collapses to his death. Not exactly a lol moment. Similar lols were lost in the new film's depiction of Goro, our favorite four-armed pal.
Now I tear out your spine.
In the first, he's an absurd puppet who likes wrestling and has a penchant for going like... Even when he kills, it just feels kind of funny, as do the character's reactions to the death. In the new version, Goro's a scary CGI concoction who literally hunts down the main character's wife and child. Gone is any trace of the
I
original.
think it was a CGI concoction right there, too, though. To be
In
fair.
summing up our criticism of the new film, it's worth considering another quote from Sontag's seminal essay. When something is just bad,
Well, let's
rather than
smoke a
camp,
cigarette right
it's
there.
often because it is too mediocre in ambition. The artist hasn't attempted to do anything really outlandish. This seems to sum up the problems of the Mortal Kombat remake to a T. It's a gore-filled film full of insanely over-the-top action, but infused with zero sense of humor, other than the occasional lame crack from Kano.
Arms dealer, drug runner, murder for hire, scum of the earth.
I also give really good foot massages.
And one great shout out to the game's most annoying strategy.
That the only move you know, mate?
In this way, the film fails to hit the mark of outlandish in the way that its predecessor did so beautifully. But what do you guys think? Are we being too harsh
That's
on
a
the
valid
remake?
point.
Is the 1995 version outdated or as lovable as ever? Let us know in the comments. As always, thanks to our patrons for all your support. Hit that subscribe button like you're split.
There is an aspect of just like ridiculousness that really hits differently when you know it's ridiculous. I'm just thinking about another film. You can't call it camp, but it's hold on. Why can't I think of names? Oh yeah. But I definitely would possibly consider this part of cult. Oh. All right, maybe spoilers because a YouTuber that I did really did this.